Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to EllieMD's live educational series. We are so glad you're joining us today. At EllieMD, we are redefining telehealth by creating a space for meaningful conversations, science-driven insights, and guided support that empowers you to take charge of your health. Today, we're excited to welcome May Bagnell, a functional neurology and mindset coach, an integrative health practitioner who specializes in helping women navigate menopause and midlife with clarity, confidence, and vitality. May is the creator of Be Well Femme and the co-founder of the internationally recognized Bagnell Brain Center. With over 20 years of experience, her work focuses on powerful connection between the brain, nervous system, metabolism, and hormones. She's known for her compassionate approach and for translating complex neuroscience into practical, life-changing tools for women experiencing burnout, hormonal shifts, and chronic symptoms. May's philosophy centers on the order of operations of things, with healing, where foundational support, nervous system regulation, metabolic balance, and peptides are layered intentionally to create lasting results. May, we're so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us. This is a fun conversation. I love it. Thank you for being here.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here and being part of the LEMD process too. It's been a game changer for me personally as well as professionally. So,
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for
yeah.
being here. Why don't you share a little about your background? What made you so passionate about women's hormones and helping women navigate the brain-body connection? How did
Yeah.
you get into it?
Well, like many women here, perhaps even you, honey, my entrepreneurial journey started in my early 20s. And my career started as a childbirth educator, lactation specialist, and a doula. So I did that for 17 years. And that was right after I had my third child. And I realized there was a way that was more joyful. At least that was my experience. And I knew that other women were searching for that. So I worked that process. And then throughout that process, coaching found me because as I was working with my clients, I recognized very early on, with myself included, that the mindset piece was so important to anything we want to transform. And especially if we want to do something different in childbirthing. We need to have a different mindset if we're deciding that we want to have a natural childbirth, right? If that's our choice.
Mhm.
And so coaching really came very naturally to me. I learned so much for myself, and then that continued with my clients. And then, of course, working alongside with my husband, who's a functional neurologist, we've always been working with clients, mostly female and all different ages. But, that sweet spot seemed to be always the women that were right on the cusp of entering menopause in that perimenopausal state, going into menopause, and a lot of stuff was shifting and changing for them. And so we worked and partnered together in serving our clients. And then in the last few years, getting the integrative health practitioner piece really has helped me even be more grounded in the support that I can offer my clients one-to-one. So I always say my husband has been an incredible mentor to me all these years. And then I've also sought out other mentors to continue the work. So the common denominator has always been women. In
Mm.
all of my work, it's always been women. And so that's really my heart. And then going through the different seasons and stages of my own life, having three children and now having four grandchildren, we're in that season of life, having gone through all of those hormonal shifts. So I can speak to some of the things that I went through before I knew what I know now.
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your experience. And you've seen it all from childbirth on. So it's beautiful. I mean, that's where the hormones start to shift and change for a lot of women here. So
Yep.
I'm excited to talk about this. But to set the stage, when women begin entering midlife, what are some of the earliest signs that they see with changes in their body? What can they expect?
Well, most of us who've already gone through it or are going through it probably are all screaming, say, I don't remember the thing I was about to say. The tip of the tongue experience, right? There's this, all of a sudden, this weight gain that seems to come on out of nowhere. There's the sleepless nights, there's the hot flashes. But the earlier signs, we think menopause just kind of happens. You know, it happens, but it kind of comes in phases, right? And most of them are very subtle, and usually the body knows how to whisper before it screams at us. But we are not very good at listening to those whispers, or we just like, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And so understanding that these changes will happen are good to know and not to be afraid of it. I like to say, for all of us ladies in the room and men too, like understand for your ladies and that you love, menopause is an upgrade. It might sound like, okay, what are you talking about, May? Because people are like, menopause is not an upgrade, but it definitely can be. Because if you treat it as such, then you realize you get to design your life around this new normal. Because your body's going to go through the hormonal shifts and changes. Yes, can we support that with HRT or bioidenticals? Yes. Can we support that with peptides? Yes. Can we support that with looking at our insulin? Of course. So we can do all of those things now that we have the education. So rather than fearing it, we can embrace it and step into it as a time to up level who we are, how we think of ourselves, and also how we treat our body. So we can move from a Honda SUV to a Maserati.
So biologically and physiologically, what is happening? What is happening during this time of upgrade?
Yeah,
Software
time
upgrades
for great.
happening,
Yes.
clearly.
We want to go positive, right? Let's go positive.
But what
So,
is happening? What are the hormones that are shifting and
yeah,
changing?
well,
What's
the hormones are
responsible?
depleting, right? Or they're dysregulating. And so the brain relies a lot on our hormones. It isn't just for our menstrual cycle, right? It isn't just for indicating those things. So our brain relies on those things. And so when we start to reduce the hormone levels in our body, then our brain starts to react and respond. And a lot of times for some women, it can be very rapid, depending on what's happening, right? So some women, if we took a poll here, anyone who's already been through menopause, some of you might say it was relatively easy. It kind of came on. I had some hot flashes and I did pretty okay. And then there's other of us that would say, oh my gosh, menopause slapped me in the face. And all of a sudden I was like a year just miserable and not knowing what to deal with myself, how to deal with myself. And I think part of that has to do either with our genetic predisposition, right? Because I also studied functional genomics. And then also the aspect of how well we've cared for ourselves prior to entering into menopause, right? So have we been good at looking at our inflammation markers? Have we been managing our energy levels by the way we treat ourselves, right? Meaning chronic stress, chronic schedules, sleep, right? Have we continued to move our bodies? So there are ways to kind of usher ourselves into the menopause season of life that doesn't have to feel like a full assault on the body, if that makes sense.
Mhm. But which hormones are the actual culprits? Is it estrogen? Is it testosterone? Is it progesterone? Is it all of it? Which ones are the most
Every woman's
effective?
different, but the one that gets the biggest bad rap is always estrogen. But of course, they all balance each other out, right? So you've got estrogen, you've got progesterone, you've got testosterone. And as females, we make more of the estrogen than we do of the testosterone. But if a woman's dealing with PCOS, right, then she might have more testosterone in her body. So it's not such an easy answer to say it's one particular hormone, right? But all of them start to get dysregulated. And so that's why it's good to do analysis, right? To do labs regularly just to see what the numbers are. And to check what they are. And then we can see those fluctuations. And I don't have the app, but a few of my clients have told me there's these apps now where you can, what you probably sounds like you know about it, where you can monitor what your hormones are doing throughout your cycle, even if you're still cycling. So I think those are good indicators too. Like these are things we didn't have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or before, right? So now we have a good way to gauge what the hormones are doing. And so we can stay ahead of that, right? Through our food, our nutrition, our movement, and our rest.
For me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
For me, it's been a game changer. I've downloaded Hormona. That's one of the apps.
Okay.
But a lot of times I didn't know what was happening. Like, why am I feeling so emotional, so moody, so bloated, so dysregulated, like something's off. But now just opening up the app and seeing those curves as they're happening throughout the month, I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, well, it makes sense. I'm on a down from estrogen,
Yeah.
progesterone, estrogen, everything's crashing. Of course, I'm going to feel this way. So for me, it's been so grounding just to have the information and have access to it. And I've been vetting a lot of tools and resources. There's one that I found where it's a spit test, and based off of the protein structures, you can tell, how much estrogen they've been able to use AI to correlate it to like your estrogen and progesterone levels. So
Wild what we can do.
very interesting.
Yeah,
I think we're going to get more and more tools in the near future where women don't have to wonder and guess what is happening to me. So I
that's right.
love that.
That's right.
Information is power. But with that said, so as estrogen becomes depleted, I mean, we touched on this a little bit. You feel bloated or, you start gaining fat in certain parts. But other than that, when it comes to the brain neurology,
Yeah.
besides brain fog and forgetfulness, what else can you expect so that a lot of women here who are going through that, they're like, oh, so that's what it is. Okay. Like what else can we begin to expect
Well, as far as symptoms, you mean like
as far as
changes?
symptoms? That's
Yeah.
correct.
So sleep dysregulation. So whenever the brain is affected, it's the master controller of everything else in our body and system, right? Even the gut. And so what happens in menopause when the brain is dysregulated, I don't even want to say menopause. This is true across the board. When the brain is dysregulated, then the rest of the body is going to be dysregulated in some way, shape, or form, right? So the gut is one of like the systems in the hit list, right? So I like to talk about a systems approach versus a symptoms approach. So it's a bit of a tongue twister, but if we think about the systems of our body versus trying to figure out why we have symptoms only, then we can correlate that to the system. And then we can actively support and nourish the system and do whatever we need to do to support the system. So for the gut, for example, right, the gut will get dysregulated when the brain is dysregulated. So we want to pay closer attention to nourishing foods, and that's going to be different for every person, right? It could be different for every person, and sometimes with my clients, like we'll go into understanding, do we have some food sensitivities that we need to be mindful of? Do we want to take away, certain food groups just to give the gut a break? And even before that, one of the things that I love to champion is making sure that we can detox the liver and that we have drainage pathways open, right? The lymph system is open. We want to make sure that we do that even before we detox. I mean, I don't know how many of you here have tried to do a detox and then you feel really, really poor during that detox, right? I mean, and it's expected to have some headachy, some tiredness when you're detoxing your liver, surely. But if you were to prior to make sure that you're also working with the lymph system and making sure that things are opened up, then your body's going to have easier time detoxifying itself. But one of the first orders of operations, the way I like to call it, is we look at the gut. I'm sorry, we look at the liver and we do the phase 1, phase 2 detoxification of the liver. And then we may do that for like 7 up to 21 days, depending on, what a person needs. And then we'll roll into how are we going to support the gut? And if we've got leaky gut issues and if we've got, bowel dysregulation, we're going to address that. But we could simultaneously address, how we can support someone's sleep at the same time. Because if we're not sleeping well, which happens in menopause, then that dysregulation sets off a whole cascade of other events, right? So it sounds really terrible and sounds really like chaotic, but sometimes that's what the body feels like. That's what's happening in the body internally. And so then we feel like we're chaotic. We feel like, what the heck is happening to me? And all these different symptoms are coming out of nowhere, which of course they're not. So when we begin to kind of take a step back, we can step into menopause with this principle, right? My body is shifting and changing, right? It's not trying to come against me. My body is just simply shifting and changing. So I get to shift and change with my lifestyle approach. A lot of times women will say, and I've caught myself saying this many years ago, I've done nothing different and my body is doing all these crazy things. I've gained 20 pounds and I've done nothing different. And the answer to that is right. because we've done nothing different,
Mhm.
right? We have to do something different when our body's behaving differently. So it really is an opportunity to up level ourselves and upgrade how we care for ourselves and things like peptides and good nourishment and all these different things. This all falls into that category.
They all tie into one another.
They
Now, you
do.
mentioned order of operations and you emphasize that in your work. Can you explain what that means exactly?
Yeah.
Um,
So I think there's foundational principles. So let's think about it this way. You know, if we're designing or renovating a house, and my husband and I love to do different things in the house. If we're trying to renovate the house, I'm not going to go buy the designer furniture before I take care of the plumbing and the wiring and the foundation of the home, or if I'm building a house, right? So when we think about our physiology and we think about how our body works, a lot of times what we're after is we're after the quick fix, even if it's a natural quick fix, right? I've heard it said a few years ago that even all the holistic approaches that we could do, like all the supplements and all of that, really has been called now green medicine, right? Because we're substituting one for another. And it's just, we haven't shifted our idea, right? We haven't had a reframe in our mind of how our body is functioning and how to treat it. So, as order of operations to me is what I was saying earlier. We got to look at the systems of the body. So, by doing an analysis, and doesn't even mean blood work and all of that, we can just do a check of how the body's behaving, yes, through symptoms, but we're not going to focus on the symptoms. Like we're just going to try to eliminate the symptoms. That's not the goal. The goal will, that would be the outcome. Elimination of symptoms would be the outcome, but the goal is to address the system of the body. So for example, if we know that the brain is dysregulated, then we want to do some things to calm the brain, right? We want to do some calming therapies, intervention strategies. If we know that the gut is dysregulated, then we're going to give the gut a rest. We can include things like fasting and bone broth, and I'm not talking supplements even yet, right? We're doing things that are giving our body a rest so that we can the system of itself can regulate. Our bodies are self-healing. I think all of us here, we're here, we all get that. Our bodies are self-healing. And why I love peptides so much, little segue, why I love peptides so much is because peptides just remind our body what it once used to know how to do.
mhm.
Right? Our bodies used to know how to do things really, really well before it was interrupted by a bad lifestyle or challenging lifestyle or trauma or, age-related conditions, right? There's all sorts of things we've all walked through and we could all tell our stories. Um, but we can still start in the same place. And the same place is to assess how all of these systems are functioning for us. And then we can go after the least invasive way to approach that and to start laying better foundations for those systems so that now they can go back to doing what they know to do and how they know how to behave.
I love that. Thank you for explaining it really,
Yeah.
really well. I love the root cause approach, and I feel like it's everything that the healthcare system doesn't do for us. It's
Yeah.
all about mitigating symptoms and putting a band-aid on things. And if you
Yeah.
take a step back and really approach it from root cause, I think you could get so much more out of it. You mentioned bone broth. I just want to know, what does bone broth do for the
Well,
system?
yeah, bone broth is really healing to the microbiome, talking about the microbiome. So you can make it fresh. There's all sorts of recipes you can get online with all organic ingredients. You can buy it. But it's one of the most, I love it. I love to use it myself personally. I love to advocate for it with my clients. And especially when we're going for gut health and we're going through a fasting, semi-fasted period, that bone broth really can do a wonderful healing process for the microbiome.
Love it. And it has collagen, it has protein. You just squeeze a little lemon in there and
So good.
you just sip it like tea. Thank you for that
Yes.
little tip. Now let's transition and talk about peptides. You mentioned peptides, but actually let's take one step back. Hormones, hormone therapy for individuals, either BHRT, HRTs. Can you touch on, first of all, what are the tests that people can go and request from their doctors today, women? What can they go and request? Because I think, I mean, I don't know if I know this topic's generally geared towards women, but there are men here too that also
Sure.
have testosterone imbalances. So, what should we ask for when we go to our doctor? What kind of tests? And then from there, what are some of the hormone therapy options before we talk about peptides?
Yeah, so I'm not so well versed on all the therapy options just because I don't work in that space. But what I would say from a testing perspective is that you really want to know what your full hormone panel, like comprehensive panel, like all of your hormones. We're not just want to look at one aspect of your estrogen. We want to look at estradiol. We want to look at all of the things. Progesterone. We'd like to see testosterone levels. And also, it would be really wise to see your thyroid levels because your thyroid hormones, of course, they're they interplay in this whole process, right? So looking at all of those things would be really vital, number one. Knowing where you're starting. And then you have some options. The other test that I would also recommend, which is not one that is regularly recommended, and that would be a genetic test. And a genetic test is going to give you an understanding as to how you do, first of all, how you detoxify, which is really important to not only hormones, but everything else you want to do as you want to heal. But also, it'll give you indications to how your hormones play, genetically. So, for example, when I did my genetic test, I learned, and I had already had this suspicion from before, but I learned that my body has more of a tendency towards estrogen toxicity. So if which I did before I knew this, were to do an estradiol cream or an estradiol cream, right? Like have now for like the face and everything. If I were to do that, my body does not respond well to it. And it was very obvious in my case because when I applied it to my face ballooned. I got rid of all the little wrinkles that I had, but I was holding on to a lot of water. So in my case, the estrogen just gets pulled in, right? Does not get utilized, it gets stored. I put on more weight when I was using estradiol, so that for me wasn't an option. Once I understood that, then I realized that for me, the better option would be testosterone therapy. And so there's different ways to do that. You can do testosterone creams, as we know. You can also do pelleting. And I don't advocate that for everyone, but that is a personal use of mine. I have found that has been, especially with my case genetically, that has worked really well. So it supports those numbers. And then I take things like I eat a lot of cruciferous vegetables. That's really important to keep in mind. Or you can take a DIM product, right? DIM. So all of these things are
What is that? What's a DIM
I
product?
don't ask me to say it because I don't know how to say it. It's like this is super long word, but DIM. If I can, I'll look for it and I'll
But
put
what
it.
is it? What does it do?
Well, what it does is it helps so that you don't aromatize your testosterone into estrogen, right? And especially for someone like myself, that would be not a good thing for me. And I find that that's often true for a lot of women. So when I have my clients do this genetic test, now we've got not only a blueprint for her hormones, but she's got the blueprint for her entire genetics for the rest of her life because your genetics don't change. What alters our genetics is our lifestyle, basically, right? Or what alters our genetics or what turns a switch on to our genetics, that things that we don't want to have expressed would be our lifestyle. So if we
Mm.
can understand that we're predisposed to certain things, again, being a mindset coach, we're looking at it from, okay, how can I have agency over my health? Not like have fear over this possibility that could happen in my life, right? So now I want the most agency I can over my health. So understanding these things, I have an opportunity to now make a difference, in my health and also in the health of my clients.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for
Yep.
sharing that. So now let's transition and talk about peptides. You talked a lot about detoxing, the detoxing of the liver. What peptides would you recommend for detoxing the body?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily start with thinking of detoxing the body,
Okay, so
right?
let's take a step back.
But we would take a step back, right? So in order of operations, we would detox, right? Because even when we do the detox, we're off of supplements, most supplements, so that we can give the liver a rest. And then one of my go-tos, my favorite to go to always is the BPC 157 and TB 500. That combination to me, um, And we're going to talk about microdosing also, but that combination to me, I feel like is a foundational peptide. There might be some cases where we would start with something else first, but that is foundational. And now we're setting the stage, especially if we're talking about women in menopause or in perimenopause. Inflammation is one of those things that it does begin in the body. And so if we're trying to eliminate the inflammation potential, we're going to do that through nutrition, right? We may add some supplementation to that. But now peptides, once we've laid that foundation, the peptides are going to be a game changer because now it's going to take the really good work that we're already doing and it's going to amplify it. And that was my case also. When I started peptides, I kind of was one of those sitting on the sidelines watching everybody do peptides and just see, okay, how is this really going to be? I'm not one of those that jumps into things right away. I tend to kind of stay and really learn about it before I'm ready. But once I did, I was like, man, why didn't I do this 6 months ago? Right? Because 6 months ago, I was really suffering in my body, right? I mean, not 6 months ago from now, but in the time that I started. So it has made a huge difference. The inflammation patterns in my body have all but diminished. Of course, I eat well, I detox regularly, I do all those things, but I really can tell a difference if I didn't do the peptides in my body. So it needed that extra work. So I would say that.
It's interesting, just touching on BPC. I went out with four other ladies yesterday, three
Yeah,
of which had celiac disease, allergies to gluten, wheat, and so forth. And they looked at me, they're like, is there anything I could do? And that's the first thing that came to mind, like
yeah,
fixing the gut microbiome, gut
yeah,
lining, the leaky gut, fixing
yeah.
that is the first place. So I'm glad you bring up BPC, and we combine ours with TB 500.
Hmm.
So that
Yeah,
Wolverine stack.
yeah,
That helps with heal and repair. Okay, so that is one of the peptides that you recommend. What else do
yeah.
you have?
Well, then we would go into, depending on the person, we might go into microdosing, the GLP. I've used that myself. I feel like the trizepatide that has made a big difference also in how my body releases weight. Right now, the caveat, and I know everyone here knows this, and I'm sure you've done a lot of good education, honey, on this too, is that whenever you're on even with microdosing, a GLP, or even the more powerful ones, you want to make sure that you are eating protein and that you are moving your body, right? Because we want to maintain that muscle in our physiology. Because really, muscle is the organ of longevity. As we get older, and we haven't touched on like as we move past menopause, right? But I'm always thinking what we're doing now isn't just helping our body now. What we're doing now is helping us when we're 80 and 85 and 90, right? I saw a meme one time that said, I'm not working for my bikini body, I'm working for my 85-year-old body, right? And this person is training in the gym. And I think it's all about changing reframing our mind about strength and longevity. So adding a microdosing like the GLP, I think is brilliant, especially if we're still having trouble with inflammation, dropping those excess pounds, and shedding weight, as I like to say, right? Because it is about fat loss. We don't want to lose muscle. We want to put on muscle. And so when we're on these, we want to be training and thinking longevity long term, right? So that would be another one that I would recommend. Um, of course, the copper peptide is, I think, one of my favorites. It is so powerful. And talk about healing. I mean, this is also very beneficial for healing the body. It's not just the beauty peptide, right? But it's amazing for the skin. And what we're seeing on the outside, imagine what it's doing on the inside of our body, right? Because we're getting the external benefit of seeing the skin shift and change, but also internally, those things are happening. So those are top three in reference to healing and support for women that I think of.
What are your thoughts on the GHRH and GHRPs, like tesamorelin, ipamorelin,
Yeah.
samorelin? Is that something that you also recommend?
Yeah, from time to
Growth
time, I think
hormone.
I think that's important, and I think especially as we get older, and also we want to be training, more efficiently, and we want to be able to allow our body to do and put on more muscle and be able to sleep better at night. I think stacking those peptides are really wonderful. So if we're having, so again, we're picking and choosing based on, okay, what are the biggest challenges and what's the system behind the challenges that that woman's having? And now we're going to go to the go-to things like the peptides or the supplement or the system overhaul, right? Whether it's detoxing or what have you, to affect that system and to make that be more powerful and work
And,
better for you.
and for someone who's going through or has issues with energy, a little bit of brain fog, is NAD something that you recommend for them?
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
absolutely. I was going to mention that one next. Yeah, so
Yeah.
NAD is great. Of course, glutathione is wonderful, a master antioxidant of our body. But NAD is a great peptide to include if we're looking for not only longevity, but also for that mitochondrial support, right?
Mhm.
So three things that we want to remember. Okay, if you want to write these down, three things that you want to things that you want to remember that sometimes fail in the body, right? And that would be when we're dealing with insulin resistance, right? You don't have to be diabetic, right? You could be pre-diabetic, or you could even be having numbers with your A1C. You know, you're teetering and you're a little higher on your A1C than you want. You ideally would like that number to be below 5, even cleaner, 4, 3, right? But we have to work to that sometimes. But insulin resistance, we want to monitor, number one. Mitochondrial dysregulation, you're feeling tired all the time. It's hard to stay awake. You get that afternoon slump. And that still happens to me from time to time, but it's usually cyclical, right? Or related to my schedule, right? If my schedule's been really busy and I haven't had the adequate rest that I wanted to have with my sleep architecture the last few nights, right? So we can always point back to where can we do better to get that energy back. So what did I say? Insulin resistant, metabolic dysregulation, and what's the other one that I wanted to tell you? So insulin, mitochondrial, it'll come to me. But there's three areas of, oh, inflammation. We talked about that. So inflammation. So these are the three things that how the body will react when the systems are not regulated. So
Mm.
let's go to regulate the systems, and then those things start to dampen down.
Can you touch on inflammation? Because in the world of aging, longevity, I mean, inflammaging is a key term. And let's talk about what inflammation actually does to the body and or those glucose spikes that lead to inflammation throughout the body. But can you touch on all of that, the senescence and all of it? If you
Oh,
could touch on
that's
inflammation.
a whole
I
fun
know.
workshop.
Well, let's
Well,
talk about inflammation.
let's just say it this way. The body doesn't want to be inflamed. Okay. The body does not want to be inflamed. It becomes a reaction to the other systems not working well, right? So to your point, when insulin is spiking and we're doing this thing, and by the way, if you haven't done this already, it'd be really great to get a continuous glucose monitor. It is a wonderful way to see how your body, how your blood sugar, your insulin behaves throughout the day, how it behaves when you move your body, when you exercise, how it behaves when you eat certain foods. Because we just kind of go about our day, we don't really know unless we feel something, right? Like that energy slump or we're feeling something else. Unless we feel something, we're just assuming that our blood sugar is okay until the doctor tests us, right? So having the agency, which is what I talk about all the time with my clients, over your own health, you can get a glucose monitor, a continuous glucose monitor, and you can see how your body behaves. And let me tell you, that is the biggest masterclass you're going to get on your body, and especially in this one area that you have complete and utter control over, right? Because you can change the way you eat, you can change the way you move, right? And you don't need someone telling you need a medication to alter that, right? Unless you're in this dire state. But if you're not, it becomes a great wellness tool. So when we have insulin spikes, right, then the body starts to create inflammation patterns. And we don't feel inflammation only in our joints. Like a lot of times people think, well, inflammation's in my joints because I feel it, or in my knees, but you also get inflammation of the gut, right? Your gut gets inflamed, your brain gets inflamed. You can get neuroinflammation, right? And so now we're dealing with this cascade of our inflammation in the system that it's the body's trying to regulate. but we're not helping it by our lifestyle, right? If we're still eating the way we've always eaten and we're not sleeping well and we're not taking care of these things, then those inflammation patterns continue to increase. So when we're taking things like peptides, that's think of them like text messages to those networks of your body, right? It's like, hey, by the way, you used to know how to do this. Let's get regulated again, right? Let's meet up and let's do this right. And you want to be able to utilize that to your benefit, and understand that it's helping your body in such significant ways. And people say it all the time. They'll feel it before they actually see it on paper, like all their lab numbers, but you'll notice the difference in your body and how it begins to go through that process.
hmm And it starts functioning optimally. Well, touching on the continuous glucose monitor, that was one of the biggest learning experiences of my life. I
Right?
wore one for 3 months, but it's incredible. It's not like certain foods would spike it even more. If it was done on an empty stomach, for
Yes.
example, you would get different spikes.
Yes.
Post-exercise, pre-exercise, just learning about your body and becoming in tune with what it's doing and its natural processes was extraordinary in so many ways. So I highly, highly, highly recommend.
Yes.
If you
Yeah.
haven't, get yourself a continuous glucose monitor and you'll learn. And also touch on that. There's someone by the name, if you don't follow her already, her name is Glucose Goddess. You can
Oh,
follow her on
yes.
Instagram.
Yeah.
She is fantastic because what she teaches you is like, for example, a pasta dish, you get this glucose spike. However, 2 tablespoons of Greek yogurt prior to eating that pasta dish, you don't get the same spike.
Yep.
Or a shot of apple cider vinegar, you don't get this. So she gives you all these hacks. There's
Yeah.
different ways to hack your body so that you don't get these huge spikes and still enjoy the meals that you'd like to typically enjoy.
Yes.
Anyways, you could try that out if you want.
Well,
Glucose
I
God.
love watching her too, because she follows with the same mindset that I have of like eating like certain order of operations, right? Like, so one of the things she teaches is fiber first.
That's right.
And I've intuitively done that, but when I learned that from her, I thought I love that. So when we go out to a restaurant, my husband and I, we always order the broccolini or the Brussels sprouts, as our appetizer, right? So we order our vegetables and then we'll order our main meal, right? So even if you had a glass of wine, you can do that after the fiber is already, so everything's just kind of going in and stacking in the right order. You don't get the same insulin spike, right? Now, this is just talking about insulin. If we're trying to lose body fat and we're trying to have a different goal in life, then the eating is going to be different, right? We're going to have a different eating approach. But it's just as far as insulin spike is concerned, you can really alter how your body responds, and it's really
What
powerful.
we're talking about energy. So it's like all those glucose spikes throughout the day, the dips, high, low, high, low. It just starts feeling so draining.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm exhausted and it's 4 o'clock. So controlling for that and then really understanding during the meal, like, why am I feeling so exhausted? Well,
Yes.
the order of operations matter. That's what I'm
Yes.
trying to get at. So, no, I love this. Do you have anything? Because I do want to answer some that we have 15 minutes. I do want to get to
Oh,
some of the questions that are coming in.
sure.
And if anyone has questions, please list them in the comment section below. Someone wrote, I've done a DNA test that indicated mitochondrial dysfunction, NADN, methylene blue. Oh, we didn't even touch on methylene blue. We launched that a couple weeks ago and doing the research on
Yeah.
how methylene blue helps with cognitive health, long-term memory, cognitive function and health, and metabolic regulation has been. So methylene blue have been life-changing. Is it too optimistic to believe my body may relearn how to create energy after using NAD for a while?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's too optimistic. I would say to that person, after listening to this, consider what else you can be doing in your life that's going to be supportive to liberating energy in your body. And that's what I always like to say. People always ask me, what can I take to have energy? Right. And I get what they're asking, but I want to reframe that thought to, I don't want you to think of what you can take to have energy, because I could tell you have a coffee. I could tell you go have an energy drink, right? We could do all sorts of supplements. But what can we do to liberate energy from your system? So while you're doing the methylene blue and NAD and these things that are supportive, what else can you do that is part of your natural physiology that your body will thank you for?
Mm. Can you take tirzepatide with HRT? Or are you saying if someone saying if hormones are not regulated yet, then you do not recommend peptides until our hormones are in line?
No,
Order of
not necessarily.
operations.
Yeah, order of operations, but not necessarily. It depends on the person, right? I can't give a blanket recommendation on that because it depends on some person's history and what we're working on and what the goals are. But I do them together, right? So I do pelleting and I'm also on my microdosing and my BPC 157 and TB 500. So, I stack them on different days, but I do them concurrently. That may not be wise for every person, depending on what we're working on. But I think you just consider where you're at. And if you feel, and I know with LEMD, your practitioner can also guide you with that as well, because they'll know your medical history. You'll have to have answered some questions about that.
Yeah, we find in a small subset of patients they can't lose weight. They've tried to up they're on tirzepatide, they've increased their dose, they're not losing weight. They've upped their protein and they're still not, they've upped their hydration. In those cases, checking your hormones is critical
Yep.
because something else is happening. If you've increased your dose, you're still not losing weight. Like you got to go look under the hood to see what else is going on. So do you want to touch on that a little bit
Well, the other
more?
thing that I would add to that, which I've seen a lot of that in the practice, and the thing that we want to go to is we go to detox. If we haven't done any detoxing yet, and the person's come in and they're already on some peptides or they're doing some other types of hormone replacement therapy and things aren't budging, then my order of operations is like, well, let's go back to foundation, right? Let's take care of your liver and let's give your liver a break. And I had a gal who we served, for her neurology and other things metabolically for a while, for a couple of years. She comes to see us every quarter, and she was really stuck metabolically, like with her weight. And she was doing all the good things, right? Everything we've taught her, everything she knew to do, and she just wasn't releasing any of the weight. And so I said, okay, well, it's time to do a detox. And she was very resistant to it because she's like, oh, I got to fast for the first couple days. And it's like a semi-fast. I'm like, yeah. I said, just take it one day at a time. And I really want you to do 21 days. She's like, oh, no way. I'm only going to do 7 days, if that. So I said, okay, I'll take the 7 days. Let's do the 7 days. So by the 7 days, she had already felt significantly different and she dropped a few pounds, like 3 or 4 pounds. Then
Mm.
she says, okay, I want to do another week. By the end of it, she did the entire 21 days and she didn't want to stop after that because she had dropped like 13, 14 pounds. So, and it wasn't that she was dropping just, she was dropping fat, but she was also dropping excess toxins that were in her system. So sometimes it's a toxic issue or a toxins issue as well as a hormone issue.
I love glutathione for that. Our
Hmm.
master antioxidant.
Hmm.
So someone wrote that actually. They asked, can you please repeat the peptides that you recommend? You were going a little fast, I guess. So she's asking if you could
Okay.
repeat which ones you recommend.
And yes, Lori, I just saw your, yes, IHP from with Dr. Cabral. Um, the peptides that we talked about earlier,
Yes.
TB, BP7, BPC 157 and TB 500. That's the Wolverine stack, right? That one. Microdosing the GLP with the B12, I think is great. And then the other one would be for the brain would be
GHK.
the
Oh, sorry. You
the
mentioned
NAD,
GHKCU, the copper peptide.
GHKCU, yes, copper, and then the NAD plus, certainly. And then glutathione, of course, because that's our master antioxidant. But if we're going to layer them in order of operations, right? I would say I'm either starting with microdosing or the TB the Wolverine stack, right? And we might do them at the same time, but it depends on what's going on for them. But almost always, the foundational peptide will always be the PPC 157. It's the body protective compound, right? It's just an amazing peptide that is just universally wants to help us, right? It just wants to come in and like go in like a little Pac-Man and like scavenger up all the bad guys and like help the body heal. So I would say those would be foundational to me, and then you can stack other ones based on the hierarchy of needs.
Hmm, I love that. Someone asked, how does copper support the inside of the body? I think they're
Yep.
referring to the
The
GHKCU.
GHKCU, yeah. Well, because it's very healing, and I don't have a full study on that particular peptide, other than to say that I understand that it so many it has 4,000, I think, mechanisms in the body. I could be off with that number, but it knows to go into the system. It knows to go and talk to your cells. It knows how to go into the body and do what it masterfully knows how to do. What we know of it more so is how it repairs the skin, right? Because a lot of times you see it in all the beauty products now, right? It's like there's the copper peptides in this, copper gummies for this. So you see that it's touted for great hair, for good skin. And if you can imagine that it's made it to your hair and your skin, you know that what it's doing on the inside of your body is also healing.
Is BPC injectable or oral better for gut inflammation?
Um, there's different schools of thought to that, but when I started on the BPC journey, I started with the oral. And I had a lot of people on the oral because they were dealing with gut dysfunction, and it did help. But when I switch people to the injectable, I feel like that systemically has a much better reach. So it is helping the gut, but it's also helping all the other inflammation patterns and of the body as well.
I see that there's a couple of people asking about the glucose monitor. Sorry, I'm like monitoring the
Oh,
chat,
that's okay. That's
trying to
okay.
ask. You have to get it by prescription. It is, I don't know any of any services out there, but there's Nutrisense online, no affiliations. There's plenty of websites if you Google
Yeah.
CGM, continuous glucose monitor. But do you know anyone that you
Yeah, I have.
recommend?
I think I have a box here. Maybe it's in the other room, but I use Stello, which is by Dexcom, I think. So I use Stello, and I didn't need a prescription. I could just get it online, and you get the app, and it also pairs nicely with your Aura Ring. So if you're an Aura Ring wearer, they partnered up together. So it's a nice partnership to also monitor your sleep architecture, which we haven't really talked about yet, how is so important. It isn't like sleep, you're knocked out, but like your sleep architecture matters, right? So I would say Stello has been good on my view. My clients have been using it and they've had great results. And like you said, honey, a game changer for all of them too, because they had no idea how certain foods in eating them in certain orders or not, how it was affecting those spikes in their body.
Mm, that's whenever, yeah. There's a
And we
couple
don't want to
services out there.
inadvertently be
Stella.
creating, I'm sorry, we don't want to be inadvertently be creating a way of our system, our body to be, losing energy, right? We want to liberate energy.
All right. I am just going through. Oh my gosh, there's so many great questions. I don't know which one to ask. What is the genetic test called? I know there are several,
There's
but what is it?
many, yeah, there's many, but one of the companies that I like to work with is called the DNA company.
Okay.
Some of you here probably know or probably seen them, but it's a test. I think it costs about $500. But when you think about investing in a test like that, you're investing in knowledge about your genetics for the rest of your life, right? It isn't like a blood sample that you do now and this is what your blood looks like now and what your hormones look like now, right? This is something that you're going to understand how your hormones fluctuate, how your hormones behave. You'll understand way more than hormones, by the way. You'll understand detoxification pathways. You'll understand what foods and the ways of eating are better for your genetics, right? Exercise and movement that's going to be best for your genetics. And of course, there's, some adaptations into that, but understanding um, what your body likely is going to go towards, then you have a way of understanding. I understand when I did mine and my clients have done theirs, there were so many aha moments, that I saw in my clients like, oh, no wonder this happens for me, or no wonder I can't do this or I can't eat that, right? Or no wonder this happens when I eat this certain food. So things that you intuitively understand about yourself or always had this curiosity, like, I'm just so weird in this area, right? It's like, it's just your genetics. Your genetics are predisposed in a certain way. But
Mhm.
it's important when you're thinking long term, right? So why having understanding your genetics, it's long-term understanding of where your health can take you or where it won't take you, right? And this is where you can have that agency and that empowerment for your own vitality and not always having to be relying on practitioners, doctors to tell you what to do. You'll have a greater understanding for yourself.
Now, I've seen this question come in a couple times where someone's asking about vaginal dryness and night sweats.
Mhm.
What peptides you recommend for that? I don't know if PT 141 is something you recommend for vaginal dryness, but what would you say?
Well, the PT, that one is good for arousal, as we know. It might be useful in that time period, but if we're looking for long term, we'd have to maybe consider some other things. No, so what was the other question? The vaginal dryness, and what was the other one?
And night sweats.
Oh, night
Or
sweat.
it could be foods. What do you have any recommendations? Food, or maybe they just get estrogen cream or estradiol.
Yeah, I
What would
mean,
you recommend?
yeah. So again, it's case specific, right? So I hate to be like, I'm sorry, I can't like make a blanket general recommendation, but yes, a lot of women have reported that using estrogen cream has helped with that. Also, testosterone pelleting, right? That helps. Many women talk about that. I can tell you that has helped over the years. And you don't really have an issue when you balance your hormones. This is the thing. When you balance the system, right? And I'm going to harp on this. When you balance the system that overrules like how your hormones play, then the symptoms that you'll have will pretty much go by the wayside, right? So let's change our thinking of how do I address the symptom that I'm having to understand, okay, what's the global system that I have to affect, right? So balancing the hormones with phytoestrogen, foods, right? Things that we can eat, things that we can consume. Those are going to be really important components to a woman's health. And the same thing with night sweats. I don't know if I don't know enough about the Tessa and the epimorelin, if these are helpful for that. Anyone who's here can chime in on that. But that might be supportive too, because you're also dealing with like the master gland of the brain, which also affects hormone pathways, right? So I would always think like what's happening in my hypothalamus of my brain, what's happening in the pituitary of my brain, that could also be affecting the downward cascade of my hormones.
So I think we're just about at time. I wanted to leave with a comment I saw by Nina. She said, "May I just say I'm blown away. I needed to hear this, and I appreciate this so much."
Oh, well, I'm
So
so glad, Nina.
I'm going
Thank
to
you.
second what Nina said. Thank you so much, May, for coming
Okay.
on and educating our community. Thank you so much on behalf of all of us. And thank you guys, our community who tunes in every week to learn, to grow, to educate ourselves. It's a brand new year. And this is where it starts. The power that we have here at Ellie is our beautiful community where we're locking hands and arms and we're marching forward, learning together, growing together, healing together. So thank you all for tuning in. And I hope you all come back next week as we continue to explore. We have an extra special surprise next week, so be sure to tune in. But May, thank you so, so much for coming
Oh, my
on. Thank
pleasure.
you.
My
It's a
pleasure. Thank you
pleasure
for
having
having
you.
me. Thank you. All right. Bye,
Aw.
everyone.
Have a wonderful night, everyone. Good
Good
night.
night.
Mwah.
Good
Much
night.
love. Happy New Year.
Oh,
Happy.
yes. Happy New Year.